This week on Talk with Audrey, Dr. John Woods, Provost and Chief Academic Officer at the University of Phoenix, has key findings from their newly released 2024 Career Optimism Index study. It's all about how employers can develop dynamic talent that they need from within and how workers can combat stagnation within their careers. Dr. Joanne Mortimer, a medical oncologist at City of Hope Comprehensive Cancer Center, and Jessica, who was diagnosed with breast cancer, joined me to talk about the importance of BRCA mutation testing and how knowing her BRCA mutation status led to routine cancer screenings that Jessica says saved her life. Dan Leonard, Senior Meteorologist at the Weather Company, is going to talk with us about how weather is going to impact us this year. Vascular surgeon Dr. Anahita and interventional cardiologist and Association of Black Cardiologists Society for Cardiovascular Angiography and Interventions, Dr. Foluso Fakorede, join me to share new survey findings that uncovered a gap in awareness of Peripheral Artery Disease. It's also called PAD. It's one of the leading causes of amputations and impacts more than 12 million Americans each year. It's all coming up this week on Talk with Audrey. Insightful, intelligent, and inspiring conversations and information to help you improve the quality of your life. It's all about the business of living. I'll be right back after the break. You're watching Talk with Audrey. Welcome back. The last year of layoffs, strikes, and economic uncertainty has caused tension for many American workers. According to the newly released 2024 Career Optimism Index study conducted by the University of Phoenix Career Institute, more than half of Americans report feeling easily replaceable in their job position. Meanwhile, 44% of employers say that their top challenge to finding top talent in this past year is a lack of well-qualified applicants. My guest today is Dr. John Woods, Provost and Chief Academic Officer at the University of Phoenix. He has the key findings and how employers can develop dynamic talent that they need from within and how workers can combat stagnation within their careers. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on today.
I really appreciate you joining me. So let's talk first about this great talent stagnation. What's going on?
Yeah, I think worker sentiment is trending towards a feeling that they are easily replaceable, that they'd like to add more value to their organizations, and that value would come about if they were able to assume bigger and more important roles perhaps within the organization. That's going to require talent development, upskilling, mentoring, career pathing, and a lot of workers reporting that those opportunities don't exist as much as they maybe should.
Well, does that mean that employers are going to look outside of their organization for new candidates?
Yeah. Employers are concerned about turnover at a rate of about 65%. They express that sentiment. And they also say it takes them 51% say it takes them more than a month to fill a position. And so one of the solutions here that's highlighted in our data is growing that talent from within. So whether it's offering training programs or being much more conversational with employees about career pathing, career development, goal setting, mentoring, this could be a solution for filling those open roles, which has a real economic benefit for the organization as opposed to the delays sometimes experienced by looking outside to fill those roles.
And what about workers? What can they do to combat stagnation in their current role?
It's a great point, Audrey. Some of this falls on the worker as well. Workers need to take advantage of those training and development opportunities. They need to initiate these conversations with their employer or with their manager. They need to find a mentor. These are the kinds of things the Career Optimism Index indicates that employers offer these at greater than 70%, but workers around 40% say they exist. So that's a disconnect as well.
So you have to have a meeting of the mind so that employers aren't looking outside the organization, but within, and then employees are, of course, looking for opportunities within the organization to grow.
Yeah, well, the great news is we've been doing the survey for 4 years, and despite these pressures, overall workers remain optimistic at 78%. They're feeling good about their career prospects and the value that they can add to the workforce. They're willing to engage in training and development. They're ready to grow. So those are the positives in the survey. We've got a really optimistic workforce.
So where can people go for some more information?
Yeah, all of the information is housed on our website. We have something called the Career Institute. You can get to that by going to phoenix.edu/career-institute.
All right, thanks so much again for joining me. And guys, if you're looking to climb up that ladder within your organization, there are ways to do that and get your employer's attention. John Woods, Provost and Chief Academic Officer at the University of Phoenix, has been my guest. Again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Audrey.
I'll be right back. You're watching Talk with Audrey. Welcome back. While regular screenings are critical to identifying and treating breast cancer early, it's also important to be aware of any genetic mutations that already exist in your body so that you can be informed of your risk of developing cancer. If someone has an inherited BRCA mutation, meaning that it was passed down from a parent, they have an increased risk of developing certain cancers. Dr. Joanne Mortimer, a medical oncologist at City of Hope Comprehensive Cancer Center, and Jessica, who was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2023 and is an employee of AstraZeneca, joined me to talk about the importance of BRCA mutation testing and how knowing her BRCA mutation status led to routine cancer screenings that Jessica says saved her life. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
Dr. Mortimer, what's an inherited BRCA mutation and its role in breast cancer?
Yeah, so BRCA genes normally are inherited from each parent, your father and your mother, and in their normal functioning, they help to make sure that when cells die, they're repaired normally. If there is a mutation in these genes, whether it's from your father or your mother, you're at increased risk for developing cancer, and not just breast cancer, although that's the most common one we think of, but also cancer of the ovary, prostate, pancreas, and even certain skin cancers.
And who should get genetic testing?
So currently the most obvious recommendation is any woman who's had breast cancer under the age of 65 should undergo BRCA testing. But you should always discuss this with your physician as well.
How can knowing your status impact your care?
So knowing your BRCA status is primarily important to know what your risk for cancer is, and as you'll hear from Jessica, it helps to put you on a pathway of more aggressive screening for cancers, so that although we may not be able to prevent a breast cancer or another cancer from occurring, we find them early enough that they're curative.
Tell us about the Be BRCA Aware campaign.
Yeah, so the Be BRCA Aware campaign is a website that has provided a lot of information about the importance of BRCA testing and its use in treatment. And that website is BEBRCAWARE.com.
Jessica, you were diagnosed with breast cancer last year. Why did you decide to undergo genetic testing?
Yeah, I actually had the genetic testing done a long time ago, about 10 or 12 years ago, when my mother was first diagnosed with breast cancer. And that's kind of when we started talking about family history. So my mother had the genetic testing done, and she was positive for the mutation. So my sister and I got tested as well, and I was positive. So at that time, even though I was very, very young, I started having screenings every 6 months for the last, I guess, 12 years now. And even though it resulted in having a breast cancer diagnosis, it was caught so early, and I think that's just because I kind of felt empowered to just have the screenings done, so that hopefully if something came up, that it would be caught early.
How has knowing your inherited BRCA mutation status affected the decisions about your care?
Yes. So because I was having the screenings every 6 months, and I was meeting with my doctors every 6 months as well, just to, they kept a very close eye on me. And once I was diagnosed with breast cancer, talking with my doctors to just try to make the best decision for me moving forward when it came to my treatment and my surgeries after my diagnosis.
And what do you want others to know about genetic testing?
I think the biggest thing is, if you're curious about it, which I think you should be, definitely talk to your doctor about it. As Dr. Mortimer said, it's obviously recommended for people who have been diagnosed with breast cancer. But even if you haven't been diagnosed and you're just curious and you started to think about, what your family history has been, bring it up to your doctor. I would say try not to be afraid to bring it up, ask the questions, and just try to take charge of your own health.
And how are you doing now?
I'm doing really well. It's been, a rough year of surgeries and different types of medication. But overall, I'm doing really great. I'm healthy, I'm active, and really happy. So things are going great.
It's wonderful. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story. Dr. Mortimer, where can we go for some more information?
Yes, it's BRCA, BEBRCAWARE.com.
Dr. Mortimer and Jessica, thank you again for joining me, and Jessica for sharing your journey.
Thank you for having us.
There's more to come on Talk with Audrey after the break. Welcome back. Well, the weather's changing at a rapid pace and continues to have a significant impact on society. And making sure that people can stay ahead of and be prepared for increasingly erratic weather conditions is critical. My guest today is Dan Leonard, Senior Meteorologist at the Weather Company. It's an IBM business, and he's going to talk with us today about how weather is going to impact us this year. How you doing, Dan?
Great to be here.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for joining me. The Weather Company includes the Weather Channel app, which, by the way, guys, is the world's most downloaded app. If you don't have it, you got to try it out. So, Dan, there's so much going on in the weather with all the extreme weather events happening more and more. What's going on?
Yeah, it's funny. You think about it. This winter, all the way through December, it was so mild, really not much going on. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we get this incredible Arctic shock. And then guess what? We're right back into the mild pattern. So it's really interesting if you think about it, because I think these types of winter events are going to be more and more common going forward. We had a similar one last year where it was a mild winter overall, but we had a big cold shot right around Christmas. Remember that? And then the year before that, it was in Texas. We had a big freeze, but again, a mild winter in general. So this is actually kind of what we expect, just from a very simple meteorological perspective. If you have more heat into a system, heat is energy, and that's more energy for the jet streams to work with. So while our winters in general might be milder overall, they're punctuated by these extreme cold shots. Every time the jet stream amplifies, taps into more of this energy, and you can get what we call blocking patterns. So the cold shots, they're brief, but they're really intense. And I think, the next 10, 20, 30 years, these will be the types of winters we have. Generally mild, but not immune from really intense, brief cold shots.
Well, Dan, is all of this a result of global warming?
It's a question I get asked all the time. Like, is this climate change in action, Dan? And I can't definitively say, this is caused by climate change, but the best I can do is say this is a function of climate change. These types of events are more frequent in a warmer climate, and it only makes sense. When you have a lot more energy, a lot more heat for a system to work with, you're going to get more extremes. It's very simple. And those extremes, they might not just be heat waves like you would expect. That's the most obvious one, but flooding is another one. Warm air can hold more moisture, so when it comes down to it, you're more likely to have extreme flooding events in this warmer climate. And it's something that we've seen a lot of recently. Up here in New England, just recently, we had a lot of extreme flooding, and this is a common thing. You get heat waves and droughts, but you also get some extreme flooding. These are the real big events I think we'll see more and more of over time.
So have these weather events been taking place all along and we're just more aware of them because of social media and the accessibility of information?
It's both. It's both. They've always occurred, and that's the thing I get. Oh, this weather, this kind of extreme, this has always happened. I remember back when I was a kid. But the bottom line is it's the frequency and intensity of the events that seems to be changing. The flooding case that I gave, for an example, there's truly good data that shows that these types of events, they're more documented on social media. You didn't have access to this kind of thing 30, 40 years ago, so it's more in the forefront. So it's more obvious now that we can see these types of extreme events, but they are more frequent, at least some of them. There are other things, though, that really don't correlate relate to climate change. For example, hurricane intensity, you hear a lot, oh, hurricanes are going to be stronger and stronger and stronger, but there's really not that strong a data to suggest that hurricanes have been more intense over time. So really it's certain types of weather events that we focus on more than others, and heat waves and droughts, that's the most obvious example.
Well, Dan, what goes into a weather forecast in the Weather Channel app, and what makes it different?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot because people, how do you forecast the weather? You just go outside? No, we use computer models, and then we use machine learning on top of those computer models. So the computers tell us the forecast. They give us the raw forecast. We use machine learning to go on top of that to figure out, hey, this event, maybe, the models are saying it's going to be this, but last time the models said that this happened. So that's one way that we improve upon the forecast models. And then we have the humans that come in. We have a great team, over 100 meteorologists on staff that come in and sort of put the finishing touches on it and say, yeah, I've seen this event before. This is what happens when this low pressure area meets this high pressure area. So they're able to sort of tweak it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for the consumer. Doesn't matter what goes on under the hood. The Weather Channel app is the #1 downloaded app, and it's also the most accurate. And I'm not just saying that because I work there. It's been independently verified over and over again. Doesn't matter what metric you use, the Weather Channel app is always on top. So at the end of the day, the consumer they don't really need to know what's going on behind the scenes. They just know that the weather.com, the Weather Channel app is the most accurate.
You mentioned some computer algorithms and what have you. Is your team also using more AI?
Yeah, we've been using it for a long time, long before it became a buzzword. But the way we're able to use it in the machine learning is improve upon the forecast. So it's just one more tool in the tool chest that we have as meteorologists to make a good forecast. And forecasts now are so good, and AI is just sort of one filter. It's a slippery slope. You don't want AI to do everything, but a lot of times AI can see things that the humans can't and say, oh, I didn't notice that, but yes, thank you AI for, telling me that, crunching all this data and saying this solution is more likely than this other solution.
Well, the world's changing, weather's changing. Where can we go, Dan, for some more information?
Just download the Weather Channel app. It's really that simple. Weather.com, same data, but it's going to be the most accurate data. So next time somebody asks you, hey, what's the best weather app? It's that simple.
Dan Leonard, Senior Meteorologist at the Weather Company, has been my guest. Now you've got a little peek into how the weather is going to impact us this year. Thanks so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
There's more to come on Talk with Audrey after the break. You're watching Talk with Audrey. Welcome back. Peripheral Artery Disease, or PAD, is one of the leading causes of amputations and impacts more than 12 million Americans each year. Yet 70% have never heard about the disease and its devastating risk. Did you also know that Black people are 2 times more likely to suffer from PAD and up to 4 times more likely to undergo an amputation compared with whites? Vascular surgeon Dr. Anahita, an interventional cardiologist and Association of Black Cardiologists Society for Cardiovascular Angiography and Interventions, Dr. Foluso Fakorede, joined me to share new survey findings that uncovered a gap in awareness of this deadly disease, the warning signs, and the importance of early screening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Appreciate you both for joining me. Let's dive into exactly what peripheral artery disease is and how we can better understand the common risk factors and recognize the symptoms.
PAD is a disease process where there are blockages in the leg such that blood can no longer get all the way down to the toes. It's very similar to having car accidents along a highway, and the cars simply cannot make it all the way down to the end. And the problem is, the more of these blockages that a person may have in their legs, less and less and less blood can make it from the heart down to the foot. And eventually, the actual tissue that makes up the foot and the leg starts to die slowly. And that unfortunately moves up the leg and can lead to amputation. So peripheral just means arms and legs, and artery just means the actual artery. And disease is quite literally that, a disease of the inside lining. Now, there are risk factors, specifically diabetes, high blood pressure, and smoking, that are very intimately linked with having PAD. And the reason is because these three things damage the inside lining of the blood vessel, so that mounds and mounds of calcium start to build up inside the blood vessel and sort of cork it off at different areas. And then blood cannot get where it needs to go. And that, in a nutshell, is what PAD is.
So the signs and the symptoms, I mean, it sounds like this is something that that someone would be able to see if it's progressing.
Well, that's actually something that some patients can see as it's happening, because some of the signs and symptoms of peripheral arterial disease, unfortunately, it's a silent killer. If you have high blood pressure, for instance, 55% of those patients with high blood pressure will have peripheral arterial disease. We know that 80% of those who smoke or use tobacco products will have peripheral arterial disease, and diabetics are 3 to 4 times as high to suffer from peripheral arterial disease. And as Dr. Dewar mentioned, it's the buildup of plaque and cholesterol that narrows that artery and leads to poor circulation in the legs to your feet. And once you start experiencing that, some actually lack the sensation to experience that, like diabetics. So they have, neuropathy, or they have that inability to recognize. So that's why it's important for them when they go and see their doctors, and as every diabetic should know in this country, is to take off your socks and have a doctor check your pulse, because that is a sign that, hey, listen, we have trouble upstream. The other thing that you might experience is pain upon walking. When you walk for certain distances and you experience cramping or pain or fatigue, where your leg just tires out on you or gives out on you, that can be another sign. Another sign is if you have cool or cold temperatures in your extremities, or you have a non-healing wound, an ulcer in your feet, and in spite of all measures, it's just not healing, and you have those risk factors, or you're over the age of 50, and you've had this for a while, you should get a doctor to check your pulse and also check your circulation, and that can easily be done.
Well, so say you're diabetic. Can you give us some questions that people should ask their doctor to start having that conversation?
That's a great question. The first question you should actually ask is, may I take my socks off and can you check my pulse? That's the first question. Do I have PAD? The second question you should ask are any of my signs or symptoms or lack thereof attributed to PAD? Because what I see, especially with diabetic patients, and unfortunately some of them who have experienced family members or witnessed family members who have undergone either toe amputation or limb amputation, is that those questions were not asked as to, one, what are the signs or symptoms of poor circulation? Could this be poor circulation? 3, can you do a comprehensive foot exam on my foot? Can you refer me to someone to do a comprehensive foot exam or to check my pulse if you can't, right? And that's another part of this. We should not normalize just an amputation first strategy being offered to you. You should try and look for upstream preventative strategies or other avenues for you to get treated before an amputation is offered in that setting. And so it's recognizing the signs and the symptoms. If you have a wound that's not healing, an ulcer, has my circulation been checked? Is there a reason that my sugars are off? Are there medicines I should be taking to better control my sugars? Is the wound not healing because my diabetes is not well controlled, which could lead to that non-healing wound and ulcer that's also ultimately leads to an amputation? So there are layers of questions, not only on the patient side, but also on the physician side, because as much as there's a lack of awareness and only 70% to 80% of Americans have never heard of this disease, on the provider side, how many doctors are aggressive in treating those patients upstream as well before an amputation is offered? So those two have to meet in a place where we know that we are empowering that patient, we're being an advocate for them, and they're answering the right questions before it progresses to a debilitating state.
Sounds to me like the bottom line is that if you're diabetic and if you have some of the signs and symptoms that the doctors have mentioned, call your doctor and advocate for yourself. It sounds like amputation doesn't have to be the solution, and you might possibly save your toes or your legs. Thank you both for joining me. Where can we go for more information about peripheral artery disease?
We have a website, www.padpulse.org. Again, that's www.padpulse.org. That's the shared website by all of the organizations that are helping to take care of these patients and has a lot of information that can allow you to get the next step.
And that's it for this week's show. I'm Audrey Adams. Join me here next week for more insightful, intelligent, and inspiring conversations and information to help you improve the quality of your life. It's all about the business of living. I'll see you next week.